The empath is often celebrated. People call them kind. They call them compassionate. They call them gifted. They say they have a special ability to understand the feelings of others, to sense emotional shifts in a room, to anticipate needs before a word is spoken. And while that sounds beautiful on the surface, there is a question that almost nobody asks. What if the empath is not a gift? What if the empath is an adaptation? What if the person who can read every emotional signal in the room learned to do it because at some point in life it was necessary for survival? What if the empath is just the child who was never allowed to be selfish? Think about that for a moment. A child enters the world with needs, real needs, healthy needs, the need to be seen, the need to be heard, the need to take up space, the need to say no, the need to express anger, disappointment, frustration, excitement, joy, curiosity, and desire. These are not flaws. These are not defects. These are not signs of weakness or immaturity. They are signs of life. But not every child grows up in an environment where those needs are welcomed. Some children learn very early that the emotional climate of the household matters more than their own emotional reality. They learn that keeping the peace is safer than speaking the truth. They learn that pleasing others is rewarded while expressing themselves is punished. They learn that attention is given not when they reveal who they are, but when they become what everyone else needs. And so a transformation begins. The child starts studying people, not because they are fascinated, because they are afraid. They learn the meaning of a sigh. They learn the meaning of silence. They learn the meaning of a slammed door. They learn the meaning of footsteps in the hallway. They become experts in emotional weather forecasting. Long before they know who they are, they know who everyone else is. Long before they understand their own feelings, they understand everybody else's feelings. Long before they discover their own voice, they become fluent in the language of other people's moods. And everyone applauds. Everyone says, "What a thoughtful child. What a mature child. What a caring child." Nobody asks why. Nobody asks why. A 10-year-old has become responsible for emotions that were never theirs to manage. Nobody asks why a child is carrying the weight of an entire room on their shoulders. Nobody asks why that child feels guilty for having needs, because the adaptation looks like a virtue. And that is what makes it so difficult to recognize. The empath learns to monitor reactions, monitor expressions, monitor tone, monitor tension, monitor disappointment, monitor approval. They become so skilled at reading others that they eventually lose the ability to read themselves. Ask them what somebody else is feeling, and they can tell you immediately. Ask them what they are feeling, and there is often a long silence, not because they have no emotions, because they were trained to look outward instead of inward. Their attention became permanently attached to the emotional states of everyone around them, and the world rewards this. People love the person who understands them. People love the person who listens endlessly. People love the person who never demands too much. People love the person who makes life easier. The empath becomes indispensable. But being needed is not the same thing as being loved. That distinction changes everything. Many empaths spend years believing they are loved when they are actually being used, not because other people are evil, but because the empath has been conditioned to offer emotional labor without limits. They become the safe place. The therapist, the rescuer, the fixer, the caretaker, the emotional sponge. Everyone arrives carrying pain. Everyone leaves feeling lighter. And somehow the empath remains carrying all of it. The tragedy is not that they care too much. The tragedy is that they were taught their value comes from caring more about others than they care about themselves. That is not empathy. That is self-abandonment disguised as empathy. Real empathy includes yourself. Real empathy recognizes your needs alongside the needs of others. Real empathy does not require self-erasure. Real empathy does not demand sacrifice as proof of worthiness. But children who were never allowed to be selfish often struggle to understand that. The word selfish itself becomes toxic. It becomes associated with guilt, shame, rejection, conflict. The child learns that selfish means dangerous. Selfish means losing love. Selfish means becoming the problem. So they spend years running from anything that resembles self-interest. They apologize for existing. They apologize for speaking. They apologize for taking up space. They apologize for wanting more. They apologize for needing rest. They apologize for setting boundaries. They apologize for saying no. And eventually they apologize so often that they forget they were never guilty. Imagine carrying that burden for decades. Imagine believing that your needs are obstacles. Imagine believing that everyone deserves compassion except you. Imagine believing that exhaustion is proof of goodness. Imagine believing that suffering is evidence of love. That is the hidden prison many empaths live inside. From the outside, they appear strong. Inside, they are starving. Starving for permission. Befurchen to choose themselves. Befurchen to disappoint people. Befurchen to have limits. Befurchen to be imperfect. Permission to stop rescuing. Befurchen to stop performing. Befurchen to exist without earning their place every single day. The moment an empath begins healing, something remarkable happens. They start noticing how many relationships were built around their lack of boundaries. Some people celebrate their growth, others resist it. Some people respect the new boundaries, others become angry. And this is where the deepest lesson emerges. The people who benefited from your self-abandonment will often be the first to complain when you stop abandoning yourself. That realization can be painful, but it is also liberating because it reveals something important. Not everyone who loves your sacrifice loves you. Not everyone who loves your availability loves you. Not everyone who loves your usefulness loves you. Some people simply love access. And when access changes, the relationship changes. That truth forces a question. Who are you when you stop managing everyone else's emotions? Who are you when you stop being the rescuer? Who are you when you stop earning approval? Who are you when you stop carrying responsibilities that never belong to you? At first, the answer may feel uncomfortable because underneath the empath is often a person who has never truly met themselves. A person whose identity was built around adaptation, a person whose personality became a survival strategy, a person who spent so much time becoming what others needed that they never had the opportunity to become who they wanted to be. But this is not the end of the story. This is where the story begins. Because the greatest transformation is not learning how to read other people. The greatest transformation is learning how to read yourself, learning what you want, learning what you need, learning what you value, learning what you believe, learning what you refuse to tolerate, learning where your responsibility ends, learning that boundaries are not walls. They are instructions. Learning that saying no is not cruelty, it is clarity. Learning that disappointing people is sometimes the cost of being honest. Learning that protecting your peace is not selfish. Learning that self-respect and compassion can exist together. The child who was never allowed to be selfish often grows into an adult who feels responsible for everything. But healing begins when they realize something simple and powerful. You were never responsible for everyone. You were never responsible for fixing everyone. You were never responsible for carrying everyone. You were never responsible for becoming smaller so others could remain comfortable. You were never responsible for sacrificing yourself to prove your love. The world does not need more exhausted martyrs. The world needs healthy people. People who can give without disappearing. People who can care without collapsing. People who can love without losing themselves. People who understand that their worth was never dependent on their usefulness. The empath's journey is not about becoming less compassionate. It is about becoming compassionate enough to include themselves. Because the greatest act of healing is not learning how to save others. It is learning that you deserved saving too. And the moment you truly understand that, everything changes. You stop asking for permission to exist. You stop apologizing for having needs. You stop measuring your value through sacrifice. You stop carrying burdens that were never yours. You stop shrinking. You stop performing. You stop surviving. And for the first time in your life, you begin living, not as the child who was never allowed to be selfish, but as the adult who finally understands that self-respect and compassion can walk side by side, and that may be the most powerful form of empathy the world will ever see. There is another truth that many people never see until much later in life. The empath does not just learn to understand emotions, they learn to predict danger. That distinction matters, because understanding emotions comes from connection. Predicting danger comes from vigilance. One creates closeness, the other creates exhaustion. Many empaths spend years believing they are deeply connected to people when, in reality, they are deeply alert to people. Their nervous system is always scanning for tension, scanning for rejection, scanning for disappointment, scanning for signs that something is wrong. Even during moments that should feel peaceful, part of their mind remains on guard. They cannot fully relax because they learned long ago that comfort can disappear without warning. So they stay prepared for conflict, prepared for criticism, prepared for abandonment, prepared for emotional storms. The problem is that a survival skill that protects a child can imprison an adult. A child may need to pay close attention to the emotional environment. An adult deserves the freedom to live inside their own experience. Yet many empaths never receive that freedom. They carry childhood responsibilities into adult relationships. They become emotional security guards, watching everyone, monitoring everyone, managing everyone, trying to prevent problems before they happen. And because they are so skilled at this, people begin expecting it from them. Nobody asks them to carry the weight, but everyone becomes comfortable when they do. Slowly, the empath becomes trapped inside an invisible contract. A contract they never agreed to. A contract that says, keep everyone happy, keep everyone calm, keep everyone comfortable, keep everyone connected, keep everyone together, no matter what it costs you. And the cost is usually enormous, because every ounce of energy spent controlling the emotional experience of others is energy unavailable for your own growth. While everyone else is discovering themselves, the empath is managing reactions. While everyone else is building identity, the empath is building strategies. While everyone else is exploring possibility, the empath is calculating risk. The result is a strange kind of loneliness. Not the loneliness of being physically alone, the loneliness of never being fully known. People know the version of you that serves them. People know the version of you that comforts them. People know the version of you that supports them. But very few know the version of you that exists underneath all the roles. And sometimes even you do not know who that person is. Because you have spent so many years becoming whatever was necessary. You became adaptable, flexible, available, reliable, predictable. You became whatever increased the chances of acceptance. And eventually adaptation became identity. This is one of the greatest psychological illusions. If you perform a role long enough, you begin believing the role is who you are. The caretaker believes they are only valuable when caring. The rescuer believes they are only valuable when rescuing. The helper believes they are only valuable when helping. The empath believes they are only valuable when understanding everyone else. But worth is not a performance. Worth is not a transaction. Worth is not something you earn through endless emotional labor. Worth exists before achievement. Worth exists before sacrifice. Worth exists before approval. The child who never learned this becomes an adult constantly negotiating for love. They become experts in exchange. I will support you if that makes me valuable. I will listen if that makes me valuable. I will sacrifice if that makes me valuable. I will give more if that makes me valuable. I will become less if that makes me valuable. And every negotiation creates a deeper distance from the self, because genuine relationships are not built on negotiation. They are built on authenticity. The tragedy is that authenticity feels dangerous to someone who learned survival through adaptation. Authenticity means risk. Authenticity means disagreement. Authenticity means uncertainty. Authenticity means some people may not like what they see. For someone conditioned to prioritize harmony above everything else, that can feel terrifying. So they continue performing even when they are exhausted, even when they are overwhelmed, even when they are quietly falling apart. They smile, they reassure, they comfort, they encourage. and then they go home carrying burdens nobody knows exist. This hidden suffering often creates another problem: resentment, not loud resentment, silent resentment, the kind that grows slowly, the kind that accumulates over years. The empath gives and gives and gives and gives. Then one day they look around and wonder why nobody seems to care for them the way they care for others. What they do not realize is that they trained everyone to receive. They became so focused on giving that they never taught others how to support them. They became so committed to being strong that nobody recognized when they needed help. They became so skilled at hiding pain that people assumed there was no pain to see. The irony is heartbreaking. The person who understands everyone often feels understood by no one. The person who notices everyone often feels invisible. The person who carries everyone often feels abandoned. And yet they continue because stopping feels selfish. There is that word again, selfish. The word that has haunted them since childhood. The word that has controlled decisions, controlled boundaries, controlled relationships, controlled identity. But what if the definition was wrong? What if selfishness and self-respect are not the same thing? What if protecting your energy is not selfish? What if having limits is not selfish? What if saying no is not selfish? What if asking for support is not selfish? What if expressing your needs is not selfish? What if resting is not selfish? What if existing as a complete human being is not selfish? The moment that question enters the mind, everything begins changing. Because healing often starts with a single realization: you are not required to disappear in order to be loved. Ride that again. You are not required to disappear in order to be loved. You do not have to become smaller. You do not have to become quieter. You do not have to become easier. You do not have to become less demanding. You do not have to become less human. Real love does not require self-erasure. Real love creates space. Space for honesty. Space for emotion, space for imperfection, space for growth, space for boundaries, space for individuality. Anything that requires the destruction of your identity is not love. It is dependency. It is control. It is fear. Or it is a pattern that was mistaken for love because it was familiar. And familiarity is powerful. Human beings often confuse familiar pain with safety. We return to what we recognize. Even when what we recognize hurts us, the empath often finds themselves surrounded by people who need saving because that dynamic feels familiar. It feels normal. It feels comfortable. It feels predictable. The role was learned early. The role became home. But healing requires questioning every role that was built in survival.